So we're talking about the effect of interest rates on the economy. So Emmanuel, how do rising interest rates affect the economy in general and banks in particular?
For businesses to run, especially small businesses, they need loans.
Good.
And those loans that they ask for have the interest rates that we're talking about.
Uh-huh.
So it'll be harder for them to pay back something that's 7% on their investment.
Absolutely. So if you have a business idea that's making some money at 3% interest, if interest rates go up double, you may not be making money anymore. Maybe making enough to survive it with 3% interest. That if you're suddenly paying 20,000 a month instead of 10,000 a month, you can't survive. So a lot of businesses will close up, and banks in particular borrow short and lend long. So they'll give you a 30% mortgage, but they're borrowing at short-term rates. And one of the effects of rising interest rates is what's called an inverted yield curve. And this is a useful concept because you can show that it's almost always, not always, but almost always going to be followed by a recession. So like basically, if this is the maturity level of a bond or a debt, so in other words, is it paid back in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 20 years? So the maturity of the debt goes out. You would expect to see, you'd expect to see this, that the interest rate that the bank is paid will go up as the length of the loan gets longer. And that seems obvious to me, because if somebody says, can I borrow money for a day, there's less risk than if they want to borrow money for 30 years. So the interest rate on a 30-year loan is normally going to be higher than the interest rate on a 1-month loan. So that's why the money market has less risk than the long-term bond market. An inverted yield curve is the opposite, that as the maturity gets longer, the interest rate goes down. And the reason that happens is that the Fed is raising interest rates above the level where the market thinks interest rates will be in the long run. So in other words, people are reluctant to borrow in the short run because they think interest rates are going to go down. And so when this happens, when short-term interest rates exceed long-term interest rates, banks are in trouble because they borrow short and lend long, and they can't make money if short-term interest rates are 4.5% and long-term interest rates are 3%. They're losing money by functioning. And then there's an added issue for SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, that they had taken a lot of their reserves and invested them in long-term bonds, which, as you know, what happened? Well, I should ask you this. So let me ask Denasia, what happens to the value of a bond when interest rates go up, Denasia? Any thoughts?
Repeat the question.
When the interest rate goes up, what happens to the value of the bond? It's okay if you don't know it. It's not really required for this course. We're just talking informally. But what happens to the value of a bond when the interest rate goes up?
I have no idea.
Well, think about, let's say you have a bond that pays 3% interest,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And you paid $100 for it. Well, let's say interest rates go up to 4%, all right? What will make that bond yield 4% like everyone else is getting?
Um,
What happens to the price of the bond?
it
Decreases.
goes down?
It goes down, right? So very good. Jack, did you want to add something? Okay, so Jack wrote in the chat, increase. So when interest goes up, I'm sorry, when the interest rate goes up, the price of an existing bond will go down so that the fixed payment people receive will become a bigger percentage of the bond. So if somebody tries to sell it, they'll say, well, everyone else is getting 4%. This bond is only paying 3%, but I'll pay you less, and that way I'll get 4%. So the price of the bond goes down. So that's what really drives the financial markets. All right, so now why is the Fed, let's ask Hong Jian Lin, why is the Fed raising interest rates now?
Let's say again, please.
Why is the Fed raising interest rates?
So I have no idea what is right. Is it right?
Oh, you don't know? Okay, it's okay. Anyone else? Okay, Brendan, why? I see you wrote in here, Brendan.
I was gonna say that because of inflation.
Right. Okay, so what does raising interest rates have to do with inflation? Brendan?
I have no idea.
Okay,
Well, I know when like inflation goes up, you know, is bad for the economy. I know
Right.
that well. And
yeah, yeah.
you know, the
Okay, well,
Fed's raising-
let's think about what is inflation? It's what's going up in inflation.
Cost of goods.
Cost of goods, anything,
Understand.
everything's going up together, maybe at different rates. But what we've experiencing, we see like food has been going up. You know, the cost of cars went up, you know, used cars. So basically inflation just means that prices are going up. Why is that? Why do prices go up?
Well, because of the previous pandemic, uh, there's like there's well, it helped it to go up. There wasn't any workers like to work for a couple of years.
Okay, all right. So if there's a shortage of workers, wages might go up and that might cause inflation. Very good. But you're right about that, but there's a simpler explanation. I mean, if you look at what they did during the pandemic, and you're right, it's related to the pandemic. M1 just means it's the supply of money. Okay, it's how many dollars are in circulation. And when we talk about M1 is very simple. It's just currency and checking accounts, demand deposits. So it's basically cash that people have. Let me turn on the screen share and I'll show you what happened to M1. Screen share. There we go. Okay, so this is a graph put on by the St. Louis Fed. The St. Louis Fed is a regional Fed. And you can see on this graph, class, that the money supply has increased consistently and often quite rapidly. Uh, it, oh, there was some tightening in the late 90s, but it's generally gone up. The rate of increase increased in 2009, and then in the pandemic, they dramatically increased the supply of money. So why would increasing the supply of money cause inflation? Can anyone think of an explanation for that? Let me try someone new. How, I don't have the names here. How about
You said the increase of money, like,
increasing the amount of money? Hold on, let me get, oh, you can see this. So who is that just now? Ludley?
yeah.
Ludley, so
Um,
how would increasing the amount of money cause inflation?
if you, and you talking about the government spending?
Just the amount of money. It partially is probably due to government spending. Yeah, in other words, there was the subsidies for people who were out of work because of the COVID. But
Mhm.
what does it doesn't matter for what purpose, but what does increasing the amount of dollars do? Why is that related to inflation?
Wouldn't that be taking money out of the, I mean, I guess it depends on where the money is coming from, I would say, for inflation, because
Well,
if,
where is it coming from?
like, if it's, if the government is federal is producing more money than they actually have,
Yeah,
then
The Fed,
that would
the way that money comes into existence in our country and the world is that the central bank, in the US, the Federal Reserve Bank, creates
Right.
it out of thin
Yeah.
air. There's no process, just this is money, boom, and it exists. And then they deposit that money in banks. That's how money is created.
That would
So,
make the country go into a deficit, wouldn't it, from
well,
overspending?
maybe, but it just creates more money. I mean, there's more money in circulation. So,
Mhm.
so
If
basically, if there's more money in circulation, how would that be related to inflation?
Well, the prices would increase because there's more money to spend on items and
Yeah, yeah. Like let's say, just think of you're on an island and people eat one thing, oranges. That's all they do is eat oranges. And oranges cost $1 each. And then I come along and I double the supply of I double the supply of dollars without increasing the supply of oranges. The supply of oranges remains the same, but the supply of dollars doubles.
yeah, so the
So
demand would increase.
now everyone's got, instead of having enough to pay $1 for an orange, they have $2. So they start buying more oranges, and then there's scarcity. So the price of the oranges goes up because of excess demand. Okay, and it'll end up that the $2 in place of $1 results in the oranges costing $2 instead of $1. You with me?
Yes.
Okay, so that's basically what happened. So the Fed created all this money with that, but there was no increase. In fact, there was probably a decrease in the amount of goods being produced. And so, there's a problem with the supply chain and oil supply and all that kind of thing. And so there was more money chasing equal or less physical goods and actual services. And so the bidding caused prices to go up. So that's what causes inflation. So the Fed, knowing that there's been this inflation, then you see at the end of this Fred graph, there's a slight downtick, which you never saw from 1960 till now. You never saw this kind of downtick before, nothing this big. And so what the Fed is doing is saying, wait a second, we produce too much money, which is causing prices to shoot up. So now we're going to start withdrawing money out of the country. But it's not that simple, because the dollar is the global reserve currency. So the dollars that they create don't just reside here, they go all over the world. What are dollars used for globally besides spending money on American products or living in America? What is the dollar used for around the world? Does anyone know?
So I know, when it comes to like foreign exchange,
Yes.
the 8 major trading currencies: the Australian dollar, the Czech franc, the euro, the pound. They're all in comparison to the dollar.
Yeah, well, no, it goes beyond that. So basically, you're right that it has to do with trade and international trade. Jack, do you want to try it? Jack Wu? I guess Jack can't talk. But basically, and Raquel is on the right. Raquel, you want to talk? Or Raquel can't talk either. All right, so
I'm sorry,
basically,
I can talk.
okay,
I
you
can
can't
talk.
talk.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
go ahead, Professor. You were asking me a question.
What is the dollar used for globally?
It is used to for, I think someone said it, FX exchange, but it's also used to purchase goods to
Okay,
increase the, yeah.
Yeah, so countries all over the world use the dollar for trade. And so the oil industry, for example, is conducted largely in dollars. Right. And a lot of the trade in Europe is conducted in dollars. So something like, I think it's currently, it's fallen, but it's still something like 60% of world trade is conducted in dollars. So you get varying estimates, but just Googling it fast, the dollar was on one side of 88% of all foreign exchange trades in April last year. The Fed estimates that between 99 and 19, the dollar accounted for 96% of trade invoicing in the Americas, 74% in Asia, and 79% in the rest of the world. So you're talking like a huge percentage of global trade. The oil business is mostly in dollars. And so all these companies and governments need dollars. And so when the Fed prints a lot of dollars, it often will not end up here. It could end up like half or maybe more or less ends up elsewhere. And so that they printed all this money doesn't necessarily mean that the money is being used in this country to buy goods that would cause inflation. It could be soaked up elsewhere. And that's part of why we haven't had that much inflation in the last 45 years, because of the widespread use of the dollar. But one of the things that happened that was done by Trump, and then, for all the crying about how bad Trump was, the Democrats copied verbatim, was increasing tariffs and reducing global trade. So when they reduce global trade, what that does is it causes the dollars to stay more in the US. And so that may have been a factor as well. But in any case, when they print more dollars, it causes inflation, and the Fed has, that's the chief tool that the Fed has to reduce inflation, is to suck back dollars into the Fed. And it does that by selling assets it holds, largely treasury bonds, but it also has other assets. And so it sells assets and takes money out of circulation. And then there are fewer dollars. Fewer dollars means higher interest rates, but it also means that there's attacking inflation. Now, why do we care about inflation? Should we care? And a lot of people disagree with me on this. I don't agree with everybody, and they don't agree with me, but everyone's got a different take on it. But should the Fed care about inflation, or shouldn't it? I think they should. But what do you think? Janine?
I think they should, because the risk of inflation can then cause the banks to fail if people start to doubt that the economy is going to save itself, and that happens in extreme. But more importantly, it leads to unemployment, and it leads to other things that impact basic living in the home and other factors, trading,
yeah,
stock market.
Business economic planning, including business planning, but also your personal budgeting, they're all damaged by inflation, and it becomes very difficult to run your life. And people start to get frustrated. And what we've seen historically is that inflation leads to instability. Now, I'm not saying that a severe recession won't also lead to instability. Okay, so all of these things are undesirable, but what, if you look at probably the worst case scenario was Weimar Germany in the 1920s, when it was a democracy before Hitler took over. They had been forced to pay back war reparations because of World War I, and then they inflated their currency, and there was hyperinflation, which means that inflation was well over 100%. And it was going up so fast that you'd get paid an amount in the morning and it wouldn't be worth much in the afternoon. And so people had to run to the store the minute they were paid. And basically, this created a great deal of instability and a sense that democracy doesn't work. And a lot of people became alienated. They didn't like, a lot of them didn't like democracy. You study the history of Germany in that period, they didn't like democracy. A lot of them didn't like democracy for other reasons. But it certainly was a contributing factor to the instability. If you look at a country like Argentina in the 1920s, they were one of the seventh, they were the seventh richest country. And then because of a high degree of inflation that came about, because they voted in this basically fascist style government, Perón, and there was there's been on and off hyperinflation. They've stopped being a major economy. They're like a joke now, Argentina. It's like no one takes them seriously. But at one time they were one of the wealthiest countries. So inflation can have serious effects and cause a great deal of instability. But the matter is worse for the US because our currency is used in global trade so heavily, and it's held by central banks around the world. It's called a reserve currency. And when a reserve currency falls, there's going to be harsh results for the country, because if the dollar becomes undesirable, a lot of those dollars are going to find their way back to the US, and there could be very serious inflation, and so in other words, we won't be able to buy stuff from other countries, and our own prices will go up. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I mean, if there is an unstable dollar, it could. Now, in my other class, someone pointed out, well, in Europe, it's worse. And it's true. if you look up on the web, inflation in Europe right now is 8%, which is worse in the US, like 6%. So it's a little bit worse there. And even in countries that are highly competitive, like Ireland, it's 8%. But if you look at Switzerland, which is has long been probably the rich among the richest, it's not the richest country in Europe. I think that's one of those little ones like Liechtenstein or Monaco or something. But if you look at the Swiss economy, it's been very, very strong for a very long time, but longer than the US has been alive, probably. And if you look at their inflation rate in Switzerland, it's 3%, so they've managed to avoid this, but we haven't. And so basically, for that reason, now a lot of people say, yeah, but if you raise interest rates, you're going to cause unemployment. You don't want to do that. If you read the book Secrets of the Temple by William Greider about the Fed, he says, oh, who cares about inflation? The middle class does well because the debt on their house value goes down. And that may be so, but overall, a lot of people don't own houses. And so what you're really doing, what inflation really does is in the long run, subsidize the rich. And it does that because the monetary creation early in the cycle boosts asset values. So we've seen asset values for the last 40 years shooting up, and the rich have done well. And then in response, you've got to tighten, and that tends to hurt the poor a little more because they lose their jobs, but and asset values do fall. So basically, it's unclear, but it seems to me that monetary instability hurts everybody because you don't want inflation. But not everyone agrees with me. I just wanted to say that. So anyway, let's get into motivation. And before I do that, I'll take attendance. So let me dig up the attendance sheet for this class, and we will move forward. All right, here we go. So, all right, Farhad, I'm just calling your names, taking attendance. Farhad. Okay,
I'm here. Sorry, my mic wasn't working.
no problem. Okay. Ahmed.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Mohammed Afi. Mohammed Afi. Jenna Bell.
I'm here.
Hello. Joseph Catanzaro.
I'm here, Professor.
Hello. Jiamin Chen.
I'm here.
Hello. Janine.
Here.
Kermia.
I'm here, Professor.
Hello. David.
I'm here, Professor.
No, sir. Madimar.
Here.
Hello. Monica.
Here.
Hello. Alexia.
I'm here.
Hello. Yusuf.
Here.
Hello. Kani. Or Canny.
Here.
Hello. Georgie.
Here.
Hello. Summer.
Here.
Hello. Hong Jian.
Here.
Hello. Hamdi.
Here.
Ludley.
Here.
Hello. Famida.
Here.
Hello. Emmanuel.
Yep.
Okay. Raquel is here. Jishan.
Here, Professor.
Jishan. Brendan is here. Aaliyah. Aaliyah Todd. Stacy. Denasia.
Here.
Hello. Jack Wu. Jack Wu. Yayin Zhang.
Oh,
I'm
Professor, I'm here.
That was Jack.
Yeah, he's here.
Okay. Jack Wu, I see. Yixuan Zhang. Zhang.
I'm here, Professor.
Hello. Okay, I have Jack. Matthew Zhao.
Here.
Hello. Taryn.
Here.
Hello. Christian. Mendez. Janaya.
Here.
Hello. Alexander.
Here.
Hello. Jack. Shrem.
Here.
Jack Shrem. Okay, let me do the ones that missed. I'm going to do a second time. Mohammed Athi, Jishan Ruan, Aaliyah Todd, Stacy Ergiles, and Christian Mendez. Okay. All right. All right, so today I'm going to carry on with the discussion of motivation. And last time we were talking about the classical theories, and today we're going to talk about what your book calls the more contemporary theories. I think that's a kind of it's not an accurate characterization, because some of the contemporary theories are not any newer than the classical theories. But that's what they want to call it. That's fine. So among the contemporary theories are self-determination, content-based theories, let's call it that. Content-based theories, context-based theories, and process-based theories. So content theories are like things that motivate people. Context-based theories are environmental factors, namely extrinsic rewards, things like punishment and imitation of others that motivate people. And process-based theories are theories about processes that motivate people. So basically, if you look at the content theories in your textbook, one of the more elaborate ones is self-determination theory. And basically it has a few subsets, and it basically argues that motivation can be either autonomous or controlled by the environment or by other people, and basically well-being and performance are influenced by motivations. And two of the self-determination theories are cognitive evaluation theory and self-concordance theory. And cognitive evaluation theory holds that extrinsic rewards can be demotivating. And this idea, I'm going to put on the chalkboard, goes back to a couple of writers, Deshi Cohn and Alfie Cohn wrote a book, Punishment by Rewards. You can read it if you're interested. I disagree. Alfie, his last name is Cohn. Punishment by Rewards, and I don't really disagree with this idea. I think it's fundamentally flawed. But what these guys argue is that incentives cause people to work less hard. So if you want to encourage productivity, engage people. We'll talk about job engagement theory, more of a process theory. But basically, if you want to engage people, you don't want rewards to stifle their love of what they're doing. So it's kind of like, paying someone to love you. It's inappropriate. And they're saying it's the same with business, that if you pay someone to work, they're not really going to take the work seriously. They're not going to be committed to it. And it sounds good idealistically, and it's true. The famous sociologist Tönnies distinguished between Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft, in German. He was a German sociologist, and the idea of Gesellschaft is that it's a market system where people do things for exchange, whereas Gemeinschaft is where people do things for a community. So if you belong to a religion and your congregation needs something from you, you do it voluntarily, you help them with something. That's like a Gemeinschaft, you're part of a community. But if you work in a business and the business says, we need you to, do some work for us and we will pay you XYZ, that's Gesellschaft. So Gesellschaft is like the market economy, Gemeinschaft is the community. And what they're saying, what these guys are saying is that everything is community. It should all be done based on love of what you're doing. But the thing is, the problem with that argument is cognitive dissonance. And the idea of cognitive dissonance is that our minds don't feel comfortable with contradictory facts. And so if we make a commitment to one course of action, it becomes difficult to justify another course of action. So basically, what Alfie Cohn writes about, and there's a whole stream of literature, there are a lot of researchers in it, these are just two of the more famous ones, is that they do a lot of animal studies, and especially monkey studies, and they find that if they reward the monkey with some bananas, they'll be less committed to some task than if they do it as a game. So a monkey will be more motivated by fun and by feeling that they're doing it because they like it than just because you reward them. However, what this omits is that the monkeys have no choice. They're in captivity, and so they do the experiment, and they're not there because of money. But in the work setting, you don't do it unless you're offered money. So like you don't say, I'm going to become a welder because I love the people I'm doing welding for. There might be somebody who's done that, but it's going to be 1 out of 10 million. So basically, most people who become a welder or whatever, professor or whatever it is, become so because they want a career. They want to live off what they're doing, and that's normal. But once you've already established that you want to get paid, you've kind of said, I expect money, and then the money becomes a big part of a motivation for the job. So saying that you're demotivated because you get money is absurd, because the only reason you're doing it is to get money. So this whole literature is based on a faulty analogy between monkeys and human beings. People want a career. I mean, why do I work? I mean, part of it is I'm okay at it, but it's also that I need to pay my mortgage. So I work for instrumental reasons, for profit reasons, as well as because I like it. And you're not going to disentangle those things. So saying that money isn't a motivator, that people are going to be demotivated by rewards, completely ignores the nature of work in the modern world. And so I would say that cognitive evaluation theory, yeah, actually, I often wonder why that's even taken seriously by anybody, but it is. I mean, the Harvard Business Review publishes Cohn. They have on a couple of occasions, and it is taken seriously. So I'm talking about it, but I don't think it's really a useful idea. The other one is, and this idea, self-concordance theory, is that people pursue work goals that align with their interests and values. And when they do, they're more satisfied with their job. So people who do things that they want to do, that they believe in, they're going to be more highly motivated. And so they'll fit into their organizations better, they'll perform better. And if you don't really believe in what you're doing, you're not going to be as highly motivated. Okay, so the idea of self-determination theory is that there are several basic psychological needs that affect motivation. And these include, and I was talking last time about David McClelland, I think, the need for achievement and so on. And some of the needs that self-determination emphasizes include the need for relatedness, the need for autonomy, and the need for competence. Regulatory focus theory is also a content-based theory, but it holds, unlike self-determination theory, that an important determinant of motivation is how people regulate their thoughts. And so what they focus on will influence their motivational states, and in turn influence how they can be motivated. So people differ in how they regulate their thoughts. People can be motivated by promotion towards desired goals, or they can be motivated towards avoiding losses. It's kind of like in the stock market. They say people are motivated by greed or fear, one or the other. And so in regulatory focus theory, it says people have a promotion focus, they move towards desired goals, or they have a prevention focus, that they avoid conditions that pull them from the desired goals. Job engagement theory is also a content-based theory, not a process theory, as I said. And basically, job engagement, in other words, is viewed as a thing that motivates people. And it's the investment of an employee's physical, cognitive, and emotional energies into job performance. And basically, when I call on students, if they're not at the computer, it kind of suggests that they're not engaged. So the question I often ask myself is, how do I get people to be more engaged? And it's a difficult question to answer. I think student engagement is a very important part of what a school can do. And I've, through the years, puzzled about it, but it's very, very difficult to do something independent of what the organization accepts. So, if a school is, most are set up by scientific management, and you have credit hours and everything's by grades, and it's structured in a certain way, students expect exams, and it's very, very difficult to deviate from that. So basically, a firm, I think, can develop a strategy, or a school can develop a strategy for engagement. And you could turn schools into schools that are highly engaged. And I think that's one of the things US News and World Reports looks at when they rate colleges, but I don't know how much it's taken seriously. But I think the best schools will be the ones with the most engagement. I'm not sure that US News and World Report realizes that, but I think that's true. That's a school where students are really engaged in learning is going to be a great school. And the same would be with a great firm, that personality traits can influence this, but it's also a matter of creating an environment in which people feel supported and encouraged to engage. And maybe that gets us into the context-based theories. But some of the things that make employees engaged and, the content aspects of engagement are things like personality traits, like having a proactive personality, being conscientious, extroversion, having a positive personality, and one that likes to be around people, a positive affectivity, having positive emotions, and the tendency for employees to feel positive moods, i.e. positive affectivity. These are the things that cause people to feel engaged with their work. Getting into the context-based theories, these are closely related to what I was talking about last time, scientific management. And the two most important ones are behaviorism and social learning theory. And they're both, especially behaviorism, is kind of like a theoretical rendition of scientific management. So the idea in behaviorism, also known as operant conditioning, is that the environment shapes behavior. So the environment shapes behavior through stimuli, which induce certain kinds of behaviors and then create habits depending on the reinforcement. Okay, so reinforcement plays a big role. So basically, the idea is that there's some stimulus in the environment that evokes some kind of instinctive response or some kind of biological response. Okay, so it evokes some kind of need or creates some kind of desire. Okay, let's call it a desire, which in turn evokes an attempt to satisfy the desire. So there'll be an interaction of your behavior, which will depend on a habit, which will interact with a habit. How you react to the stimulated desire will in part depend on how you usually react, how you've been trained to react. This in turn results in some, results in some kind of reinforcement or outcome and the reinforcement will, oh, it doesn't work in here. The reinforcement will affect the habit. So, for example, so the reinforcement affects the habit. So, for example, you are driving along, it's sort of lunchtime, you smell grease smell from McDonald's. You like to go to McDonald's, so your behavior is habitual. You drive into the McDonald's, you smell the grease smell, the stimulus. The outcome is you'll have a Big Mac, you like it, and that reinforces the habit. Okay, so the idea is that we learn from the consequences of what we do. Learn from consequences. And the reinforcement can be things like the types of reinforcement can be, first of all, if something's bad, like let's say we don't like the Big Mac, then it's punishment. Or, or we do something wrong at work and we're put on leave or something, we're punished. So basically punishment stops us from doing something. Negative reinforcement or avoidance learning means that we normally have a negative and it's eliminated because we've done something right. So, for example, normally we're under a great deal of pressure to make a sales quota. You make the sales quota and then the pressure goes away. All right, so basically you do something good and a negative is eliminated. Rewards are what they sound like, just general positives that you get when you do the right thing. And extinction occurs when you're expecting a positive and you don't get it because you did something negative. Like you're expecting a raise, but then you accidentally step on your boss's foot and you don't get the raise. And so you say to yourself, why didn't I get the raise? Oh yeah, I stepped on my boss's foot. So basically, extinction is when you don't get an expected positive. So the idea of behaviorism is mainly that you learn from the environment. And the people who advocated behaviorism, it's began early in the 20th century with Thorndike, and he pronounced the law of effect, that you learn through the consequences of your efforts. You learn through the results, you learn through consequences. And the most famous advocate of this stream of theory was B.F. Skinner, who wrote a lot of books, one of which was really popular in the 1970s, Beyond Freedom and Dignity. And it's what it sounds like. I mean, if you look at those words, they sound very fancy, but if you look at those words, beyond freedom and dignity, he's basically saying freedom and dignity are not what you should care about. And what he basically says is that what behaviorism says is that people don't have minds. I once had a long conversation with a psychologist who was a behaviorist, and he insisted that people don't really have minds. I said, well, how do you decide what to do at night? Do you go to the theater or go to a movie or go to, watch TV? I mean, doesn't your mind determine that? And, oh, no, it's due completely to reinforcement. We're largely shaped by the reinforcement, and there's nothing really independent. So what Skinner says is that you can totally change society by, through these reinforcement techniques, punishment, avoidance learning, rewards, and so on. And you see in this a very close link to scientific management. Basically what Taylor said was that you need to motivate people through incentives. I talked about that last time. And what behaviorism says is you need to motivate people through incentives. Taylor was simple. He just said money. The behaviorist operant conditioning crew says it's more complicated. You can use punishment, you can use negative reinforcement. And if you look at 12 o'clock high, I mean, really, I would say there was a strong element of operant conditioning in the way that Savage tried to motivate the unit. It wasn't just, in other words, he's got to change the culture. He's got to change the group. And but the way he does it is largely through punishment and then negative reinforcement. And basically, there's little room for rewards. And there is other kinds of learning, like social learning theory, which I'll talk about in 1 second. And so there is sort of an environmental effect also, but a lot of what he's doing is like punishing them. He takes on this martinet thing, and this in turn creates cognitive dissonance. And he says, well, focus on the training, and if you do a good job, then I won't bear down on you so hard. And so basically that's avoidance learning. And so he takes away their bar rights, and they don't have any leave and so on, and this is punishment. And so he's trying to change the culture through these kind of behaviorist mechanisms. So basically, one of the things that I think, I mean, as I was just saying, I think behaviorism is right as far as it goes, but they have a too narrow view of humanity, that we learn purely from the environment. I think we do learn from experience often, but it's not realistic to say that we don't have minds, and that we can't learn from our own thought, or that we don't copy others. So that a psychologist named Albert Bandura wrote a book called Social Learning Theory. And social learning theory argues that it's more of a triangle, that, well, let me start with text. So there are 3 things. There's the person, there's the environment and the consequences. Well, there's the environment, and then there is the consequences of your behavior. And what he's saying is that these interact, that they're not independent. And so basically, he doesn't deny that you learn from your behavior, but he broadens it. And he says, first of all, you learn from people around you, so you learn from imitation. Second of all, you learn from internal thought. And so basically, you learn in all these different ways. It's not one or the other, and they're interactive. So I think social learning theory kind of brings behaviorism back to the real world, and says, yeah, it's true, you learn from the consequences of your behavior, but you also learn in other ways too. And I really enjoyed it. When I read Social Learning Theory years ago, I enjoyed that book very much, and respected it more so than I do behaviorism, which I think is too reductionist. So we learn from consequences, we learn from our perception, we model from others, we learn from direct consequences, and not just from environmental stimulus. Okay, now moving into process-based theories. Expectancy theory is the theory that it was created by a guy named Vroom in the 1950s. And Vroom, it's kind of what we're going to call a contingency theory, and we'll talk about those in a little while. And expectancy theory says that we learn from our expectancies. And we learn from our expectancies. So basically, it argues that there are 3 things. first of all, the valence or the value we place on a reward. Second of all, the expectation or expectancy that an effort we put out will lead to performance, that we'll be able to do it. And the third thing is the expectancy that the performance we put out will lead to a reward that's been promised. So basically, in other words, the idea that expectancy, that we have to expect that effort will lead to performance is another way of saying self-efficacy. And the saying that we expect that the performance will actually lead to the reward that's been promised, we can call trust. That we trust somebody to give the reward they promised, and we trust our own ability in this one. In the second one, we believe in our own ability to accomplish what we aim. And so what expectancy theory says is that motivation equals the interaction of the valence that we place on the reward, the expectancy that effort leads to performance, and the expectancy that performance leads to the reward that the manager promised to us. So let's say you believe that you are very good at translating ancient Chinese into English. So somebody says to you, will you please translate the Art of War by Sun Tzu into English? And you feel your competence in ancient Chinese is strong, and so you feel no qualms, and you say, I will do it. So you have a strong belief that effort will lead to performance. Now, let's say I say, I'll pay you $50,000 if you translate Sun Tzu into English, but you don't know Chinese at all. So you say, well, wait a second, I don't really know Chinese, so your $50,000 is not going to mean much to me because I won't be able to do the translation. And so you won't have the third one. I mean, you won't have the second one. But let's say you say, I do know Chinese. I'm sorry, you say, I do know Chinese, but I think you're a cheat, and I'm not going to trust you to give me the reward. So then you don't have the second one. Let's say I speak fluent Chinese. I can translate Sun Tzu. I know how to do it. I know the Chinese of that era. I can translate it, but I think you're a liar and you're not going to give me the reward. Then you don't trust the person, and so you won't have the third one. Let's say you're a billionaire and you know ancient Chinese, and you can translate it, and you trust me to be able to give the reward, but you just don't give a darn about the $50,000. You think $50,000 is chump change, and so you're too rich to worry about $50,000. Then you won't have valence for the reward. Now, what expectancy theory says is that if any one of these is zero, then your motivation will fall to zero. All right, now moving into goal setting theory. Goal setting theory is very useful, and it was created by a guy named Edwin Locke and Latham. I've spoken to Locke a couple of times, so I've had some contact with him, but he's really old now, and he's been doing this kind of research. He did this kind of research for 50 years. There was a piece in the American Psychological Journal that he and Latham wrote 3 years ago, 50 years of goal setting research. And so they've really studied this to a great degree. I think their research is fine, and they make some really practical nuts and bolts points. And basically, Locke and Latham argue that, and others who've done this research, that difficult goals, if you set goals, it's going to be a good motivator. Difficult goals result in better performance. If people are committed to a goal, they will be more effective. Focusing on people who are observing you and feeling uneasy about being evaluated by others will reduce the efficacy. Basically, you want to have a clear focus on the goal. Goals will affect simple tasks more strongly than difficult tasks. And I think you see this in that movie I might have been talking about, Black Holes, The Edge of All We Know. When you see with the empirical physicists, their task was very clear cut. They knew, it's a great movie. It's on Netflix. They knew totally that they had to create a picture of a black hole, a photograph of a black hole, and they knew how to do it, and they knew what they had to do, and it was largely a coordination problem and working together and analyzing the data, and they had clear-cut tasks, and so they were able to do it, and they got a great result, astonishing result. They had an actual photograph of a black hole. I won't tell you what it looks like. It's a spoiler. You can probably look it up on the web, but it's an incredible thing that they had that. When you see the theoretical physicists, Stephen Hawking, and he dies in the middle of the story and so on, their task is much, much more complicated and ambiguous. And they're trying to prove the possibility that the surrounding phenomena around the black hole can contain information so that when rays emit from the black hole, they will have the information that they went into the black hole with. And they prove this as a possibility. But to get there, and they're not sure they can do it, and they think they might be able to prove that it does happen. And so goal setting is a lot less effective for the theoretical physicists than for the empirical physicists. And it's a very interesting thing. And so difficult tasks are harder to affect with goals. Independent tasks are affected more than interdependent tasks. Good performance motivation differs from bad performance avoidance motivation. And mastery goals, where somebody aims to master a task, outperforms avoidance goals. Research on these orientations suggests that positive outcomes for mastery orientation are better than, and they're more positive than the bad performance avoid orientation. So in other words, mastery orientation results in better results than performance avoid orientations. Weak results for performance prove orientations. So what should you do with goals? You should do this for yourselves, for your own goals, and for when you manage people, is to set stretch goals, to set hard goals that cause people to stretch. Not that they're so difficult that they can't be achieved, but that there should be a 50% chance that people can achieve. And the final point I'll make today, and then we'll continue with this material next time. We'll have to extend this conversation a week or so, or at least one class. It will probably be a little behind, is self-efficacy theory. And the idea of self-efficacy theory is that self-efficacy means that people believe they're capable of performing something. We talked about this with expectancy theory. Self-efficacy is associated with confidence. People with confidence are more likely to succeed. So you want to encourage this in people that work for you, and you want to encourage it in yourself. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Visualize success. Repeat to yourself, you're going to succeed. You know, be like the little locomotive going up the hill. I think I can, but basically know you're going to succeed. Self-efficacy, a sense that you're competent, a sense that you can succeed if you really believe, creates a positive spiral in which those who have it become more engaged, they increase performance, and thereby further increase their self-efficacy. So it's a positive spiral where you're confident, you do something well, you improve. One little way to do this is small wins. Stephen Covey talks about the small wins idea, that if you want to succeed at something, start small. You know, it's the same with the other class. The movie The Karate Kid, I saw years ago, maybe you saw, it's an old movie, a kind of corny movie. The thing is, when the kid first starts to learn karate from the master, the guy tells him to do something menial. I forget what it was. I think it was sweeping, but he has to prove himself at sweeping before he can move on to the beginning. So basically, you prove yourself at something small and then move forward. And so basically, you develop the self-efficacy and the respect for yourself. So basically, we're out of time. And so next time, we're going to pick up with equity theory. We're going to do the job characteristics model. We'll talk a little bit about alternative work arrangements, pay per performance, important stuff, and benefits. And we'll also get into the next section. Okay, so have a nice week. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. And the class is over now, so see you next time.
Have a good weekend.
You too, Denasia. Okay, everybody, I guess there's no